Okay, so this is a bit of work in progress for my Master Grade Sinanju, and there's the inner frame as you can see, which is pretty much complete and painted, and there's some of the armour parts that I'm working on now. I've kind of stopped mid-flow because I realise this is a pretty good opportunity for me to show you how I paint some of my kits. Now, when I first started off, I used to kind of hand paint my kits, then moved on to spray paints, but these days I've started using an airbrush, but I'm pretty much a beginner at all this. I've probably done about 3 or 4 kits by now, and it's really only now that I'm getting comfortable with what I'm doing and kind of happy with the results I'm getting, I suppose. And the purpose of this video, I guess, is to just show you guys how I do it, how easy it can be, I guess, and really just hopefully give you some inspiration if you're thinking about just taking that step as well. With an airbrush, what I find is it's really easy to use, to be honest. I was surprised by how quickly you can pick one up and really get the technique of using it down enough to do what we do on models. Certainly, you know, not quite like what artists do in t-shirts or anything like that. And I certainly can't paint any crazy flames using it or anything, but really the only thing I would say with an airbrush is for me it was the whole thinning of paint and learning how to get it working, especially getting it cleaned after the end of the day and all that. So there is I won't lie, there's a bit of a steep learning curve with that aspect, but that's for another video, I guess. So on to the painting. So the first step for me is to always prime the parts that you're working on, and the reason for that is if you look at this bare plastic, especially with Gundam kits, I find is the surface is really smooth, and if you try and paint straight onto that with thinned airbrush paints, it's not going to work, it doesn't stick, and certainly if you're not aware of it, then that's probably one of the first things that puts you off. So yeah, always prime your parts. If you were just spray painting, then that's fine with most colours, maybe aside from white, then you can just spray it straight on, you won't have any issues. So that being said, what would you use to prime your parts? For me, when I first started off, I used this, which is just some normal spray paint. It's grey primer, and a good little tip is this stuff isn't really all that cheap normally. It's about, in the UK, it's about £3 or £4 for a can, and you know, it's kind of these things, you just spray it and it goes all over the place and you end up using quite a lot. Little tip for you is this, which is Mean Machine, and it's just grey primer. It's you can get this from pretty much any pound shop, and the quality is not fantastic. I certainly wouldn't use it on a Ferrari F430 by the looks of things, if I had one. But yeah, it's certainly good enough for, you know, this kind of thing. So I would definitely recommend giving this a go if you're just starting off with all of this. Now, I don't really use this stuff anymore because if you've got, like, let's say a real great Gundam or a 30th anniversary RX-78, let's say, then they have lots of tiny little panel lines, and with this kind of thing, like I say, it's quite difficult to control. I mean, it's either on or off, and you start spraying quite a lot, and you can easily sort of lose the detail within those panel lines with this kind of thing. And well, I guess here's another reason. If you look at this, then let's see if you'll focus. There you go. Dangerous for the environment, highly flammable, and a general irritant. Now, that's really not the kind of stuff that you want to be spraying indoors at all, and not even outside, to be honest. You know, it kind of goes all over your windows, and if you've got any kids or dogs, don't really care about cats, but you know, this is sort of stuff that it's not really, whilst it's convenient in a way, it's kind of not. So if you have an airbrush, then this is what I recommend using. It's a surface primer which is acrylic, so it's water based, and it's by a company called Vallejo. Now this stuff is really good, I find. I mean, look at the size of the bottle. Here's a standard Tamiya paint, and you can see it's massive. So those of you who've used an airbrush before will know how little paint it uses, and it goes a long way. So that bottle will literally last ages. Okay, so that's enough about primers, I think. Let's move on to the actual part painting. Once I've primed the parts, what I like to do is a technique called pre-shading, and most of you will be aware of this, and you've certainly seen it before. What I find is it looks honestly much more daunting than it actually is. It's in reality, I find it to be a really simple thing to do, and all you're going to do is take any black paint and just set your airbrush for quite a low pressure and really fine spray pattern, and just go around the contours really. What I use is anyway, I've said enough about the primers, but here we go. I have another bowl which is in the black colour, and I use this for general purpose sort of dark colours really. And the reason for this is the reason I like these, sorry I forgot to mention, is because these come designed for an airbrush, so they're already pre-finned. You don't have to mess around with sort of you know, getting the right consistency and all that sort of stuff. So that's the reason why I use that. Now, what you do essentially is you go around the contours, as you see in this piece here, and it really doesn't matter if you get it wrong. I mean, you can probably see I'm not very consistent in all these different places, and certainly I think here is you know, not quite as good as some of these other places, but it really doesn't matter. I mean, you want this looking quite random, I guess. It kind of adds the effect, I find. So there's a really simple part, and let me just show you a few others. So here's something a little bit more interesting. So same kind of thing, you go around the edges, and because this one's got some holes in it, so what you do there is well, that takes a little bit of practice, I guess, pointing it in the right place, you know, sort of down the middle of the hole and trying to get the edges. But really what you're doing with all this is creating like a shadow effect. So you can see here, this is part of the armor piece, and some of these spikes would come out of it, and you can see the base I've sort of shadowed there as well. So when they go in together, you're going to have like a sort of shadow effect going on at the base of this spike. Oh, one other thing I forgot to mention rather, is whilst I've got the black out, then I usually paint the bottom of these parts as well, because this one here is, you know, what sort of goes like that, and you can normally see it even though there's an inner frame that it attaches onto. You can normally still see that, so it's a good idea to paint the inside black whilst you're at it. And the same kind of thing with this piece here, which is also the top part of the shoulder. The next step is to put on a base colour, and in the Sinanju's case it is obviously going to be red. And this is quite simple as well. All you're really doing is painting in between everywhere that was black before. Now, the idea here is that it's a two-stage process. So you put on the first bit of colour, which is the red in between all the black, and you kind of purposely leave the black still quite feathered and showing through. And the second stage would be to sort of adjust your airbrush for a bit more of a wide angle spray, and you kind of put on some thin layers, and you do everything at the same time. So you do the red as well as coating over the black, and what that does is it makes the red redder, and it kind of fades out the black, so you get that pre-shaded effect to knock it back a little, because at the moment it's obviously showing a hell of a lot, and it doesn't quite look right. It kind of looks burnt at the moment, but you know, you just spray it and you keep going until you're happy with the result. And as long as you're not spraying too heavy, then it's quite an easy thing to do. You just keep going until it looks right, and you kind of get a feel for this kind of thing after you've done a few kits. So I'll just show you a few of the parts as well. So this is the part. I'll show you a bit of a comparison. So there's the before with just the pre-shading, and that's how it looks with the first layer of base colour on. So I think as you can see, this is a particularly interesting piece to show off, I guess. So yeah, I think I'm going to quite like this effect. Like I say, that there is not going to be shown as apparent as this once I start putting on the second coat. So just wanted to talk about the inner frame a little bit. Now, I'm usually quite lazy with these. At the end of the day, they're going to be on the inside, so you're not going to see them, and I don't spend the full amount of time that I normally do with some of the armour parts. What I do is paint them usually a chrome or a silver, something metallic, and all in one go. I kind of put the whole inner frame in all together in one go, like you see here, and I also paint it at the same time. Obviously I move the limbs around a little bit and things like the knees, just so you can get to all the areas that, if you just left it in this pose, then you're not going to be covering everything, so don't forget to do that. There is one little trick I do though, just to make things a bit more interesting and a bit better than otherwise, and that is I use this Tamiya Colour X19 Smoke, and basically what this is, it's a transparent grey. That's really all it is, and what you can do with that is spray it straight over something like this, and you're going to get an effect where it will darken things the more you use of it, while still maintaining the metallic look. So what I do with it is I kind of, in a bit more of a random fashion, is I kind of spray all the joints, especially things like these kind of ball joints here, the hip joints, things like the sort of elbows, especially underneath the shoulders and things like that. Just in a lot of sort of random fashion. I just spray it just so you got different tones of metallics there, and that's why, I don't know if you can see it here, but it kind of looks a little bit more realistic than otherwise. If you just sprayed this whole thing chrome and that was it, then it kind of looks a bit odd. So that's a kind of lazy way out, I guess, but that's what works for me for the inner frame. And that's about as far as I got with the Sinanju so far, so I can't really show you all of the things I've been talking about, with the finishing of the red parts and all that, so you can't really see how it looks, nor the panel lining or decals or anything like that. But I thought I'd bring in a different kit just to show you how it looks once you're done, really. And you can see here, this was done with the same techniques, and if you look on the shoulder, you can see how the edge, the contours where it would have been black, they're much more faded now, and you get a much more subtle look. And even things like on the head, I decided to do the bottom part a bit darker than the top. And looking around, you can sort of see the shading coming into effect there. It's really quite, on this one I've done it a little bit too, I kind of went a little bit overboard, and it's not as noticeable as I perhaps would like, but it's still much better than if it was just a flat coat of green. So there you go, guys. That's kind of how I paint my kits at the moment. I'm sure I'll learn more as I go along, but to get to this stage, I don't think it's taken too much time, and really I think an airbrush is a worthwhile investment. And yeah, good luck everybody. Thank you.